Hi, I'm Bob Ripley, Senior Tech Advisor with American Bonanza Society. I've been with the ABS since 2005 when I retired from Delta. And when Neil passed away several years ago, I took over Neil's job as Senior Tech Advisor, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy talking to all the members and enjoy the people I get to talk to on the phone and meet everybody at the different conventions and facilities we go to around the country. And it's just a fun job. I mean, and they're paying me to do it, which is the best part, you know?
That's right. I'm Lauren Bayles, and I work for the American Bonanza Society in our headquarters in Wichita, Kansas, and we're so glad you all are here joining us today. And Bob is our Senior Technical Advisor out of Griffin, Georgia. If you're ready, Bob, we'll go ahead and get started.
Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Our very first question comes to us from Brian Conway, and it says, in my F-33A, the fuel pump boost fails to operate initially when the OAT is about 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. It has always worked after 4 or 5 cycles of the switch. I kind of suspect the switch, but it may be the pump. I've only been in warm climates recently, but I wired a light in the circuit in the pump to indicate whether or not I am getting power to the pump the next time it fails to operate. Any hunches?
It sounds to me like the pump itself is starting to go bad and having a hard time starting the motor. If it's been in there a long, long time, your probably best bet would be to overhaul the pump, because if you get stranded somewhere and the pump will not come on, you won't get the engine started. It's very, very difficult to get it started without the pump.
Okay, perfect. And our next question is from Bob. He says, I have a 1978 V35B. I have the serial number if you need it. And he's having an issue with the manifold pressure. Here's the situation. When I settle into cruise, let's say I set the MP at 21.7 and the RPM at 2300. While I'm flying, the MP will just start randomly fluctuating between 21 and 23 while the RPMs are constant. As an aside, the CHTs are pretty even and the EGTs are also fairly even leaned ROP. As an aside, to make sure the throttle wasn't just moving in flat, I held onto it to make sure that it didn't move and the MP is still fluctuating by about 2 inches and everything else seems steady and stable. I'm puzzled. What could this be?
My first suggestion would be disconnect the line on the engine manifold where it goes up to the manifold pressure, and have your avionics shop, or if you have access to a static test box, pump up that manifold pressure gauge and the lines going to it. I suspect you have a leak in a line, either a rubber line is leaking through or a fitting is cracked or something, or the gauge is leaking internally. That should be intact just like a static system, and if it's not, it will cause fluctuations up at altitude. Because I don't think the engine is fluctuating and causing the manifold pressure. Otherwise, we'd see other indications as fuel flow and RPM.
Okay. Excellent. The next question comes from Chris. He says, Bob, any idea what the torque requirements are for the 6 bolts that secure the starter adapter on a 1960M model?
Not off the top of my head. I would have to go look that up in the maintenance manual. The engine maintenance manual is available online through Continental. It's a subscription service, but you can, if you got access to the maintenance manual, those torques will be in there, or you can use the standard size torque for the size bolt you're using, and I think most of those bolts are 1/4 inch or 5/16. And you can use a standard torque setting that's listed in most aircraft standard handbooks.
Perfect. All right, our next one comes from Tony. He says, what's the best way to free up a stuck firewall air control? It's stuck closed, knob is out. Is LPS2 the right solvent for the cable?
Yes, that's a difficult system to get free sometimes. The cable is basically a lawnmower control cable. It's a wound housing with a solid wire between or inside of the housing. If you can access as much of the housing as possible, LPS1 would probably work much better because it's thinner and it would impregnate through the cable easier. Spray the outside of the housing as far as you can spray it, engine compartment, underneath the instrument panel and everything. Then have somebody on the outside help you move the cable as you try to close it, and then help you open it again and close it again several times, spray the cable and do it again, and you can probably get it freed up. But it'll take 2 people, one on the outside and one on the inside.
Perfect. Excellent question. And our next one is from Perry. He has a K35 landing gear and flap indicator, lights replacement, and upgrade to LED recommendations or guidance.
The landing gear and flap in those airplanes are basically a plug that plugs into the panel. It's a plastic socket with a wire on the back of it. The only thing you can do is upgrade to a fixture, and you can buy the fixtures from Aircraft Spruce that go into the panel and have a nut on the back, and you can use LED upgrades for the flaps and the landing gear. They're just 12-volt system. There's nothing special about it, and you're not modifying the airplane at all, so it can be done with just a logbook entry.
Perfect. Our next question is from, B instructor Ricky Utermolen out in California. He says, hey, Lauren, I'm having trouble keeping the props since in my 55 Baron, always have to adjust the props. The knob is tight.
Okay, so they're getting out of sync. Sounds like probably a governor issue. I would try to determine which one is causing the problem, which one is getting out of the sync the most, and have that governor taken a look at, or look at the linkage on the governor to see if maybe the rod end is not worn, or the linkage may be moving in the rod end, or possible wear in the governor itself. But it sounds like a governor issue is causing the problem.
Okay, perfect. And Perry, who had the K35 question above, the landing gear and flap indicator light replacement, he said he also wants to replace sockets or housing also.
Yeah, you would have to change the whole thing, the socket, the housing, and everything, and put in a whole new indicator light, an LED indicator light. And again, they're available from Aircraft Spruce, Chief Aircraft, Sky Geek. Any of the supply houses have those lights available. Just search LED indicator lights online at one of the supply houses, and that you can see what we're talking about.
Perfect. All right, Perry. So Bob kind of answered your question there in two parts. Our next question is from Carl. He says, is there a tension number for the inner doors, and what is reasonable?
I have never been able to locate a actual number that you can read on a gauge. What I do is I take my index finger to the first knuckle right here, and I pull down on the door. And if I can open the door with my finger at the first knuckle, if I can pull it off the seat without hurting my finger, I call that a good number. It's just kind of a self-thing guideline I've come up with, and that seems to work pretty good. Because most of the doors we see at service clinics and a lot of doors that come through our shop are rigged way too tight.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. This next question comes from Michael Altman. He says, where can one rent a pressure plate to do your manifold and differential pressure checks?
I'm not sure.
Good question. No, did someone stump Bob?
Yeah, you got me on that one. I don't know where you could rent one. Continental has the diagram in their parts book or in the service manual. You could have one made, but I don't know where you'd be able to rent one. I've never tried to rent one. I have my own, and I made them many, many, many years ago, and I don't know where you're going to rent one. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. We're going to move on to He says, I have a 1970 F-33, not the F-33A. She has an IO-470N engine upgrade. She flies regularly. All ADs are current, and I am meticulous with keeping things maintained properly. How many hours should I expect to be charged for an annual inspection by a shop that has not seen her yet? I am planning on doing another set of eyes inspection in 2021.
On an average in our shop, and we don't do anything but Baron and Bonanza, so we're very used to the airplanes. On a new customer is about 40 man hours. So that's a routine number. That includes oil change, that includes cleaning the spark plugs, cleaning the fuel nozzles. Everything is part of routine maintenance, not anything out of the ordinary. Small adjustments and little things there in the gear system can be done in that 40 hours, but usually about 36 to 40 hours, 36 being an airplane we've seen before where our paperwork is on the file, and 40 hours on an airplane we've never seen before.
Okay, perfect. Great question. And this one comes from Greg. He says he recently replaced a fuel metering unit on a 1979 V35B IO520BB serial number D10198, and the shop calibrated using a high fuel flow setting. We now have about 18 GPH running ROP, and this is much higher than with the old unit. Number 2 cylinder is still running around 380 to 390 degrees Fahrenheit in cruise. replaced 3 plugs, cleaned the injectors, checked all the cylinders in June of this year. Any recommendations on next steps about and options between rich of peak or lean of peak for an IO 520 BB?
Either way you want to run it is fine. Rich of peak, just remember you're operating on the first cylinder to go lean, and if you're going to go lean of peak, on the last cylinder to go lean. Fuel settings on the ground that the shop did for you are only at takeoff setting only. There is no control over the engine once you start pulling the mixture back or start pulling the throttle back, because that's at wide open position. And on that engine, you ought to be somewhere around 25.2, 25.5, something like that, GPH on a 520 BB. If you're getting higher numbers, the fuel flow may be too high on takeoff. You might want to check your gauge and see what your fuel flow on takeoff, like I said, around 25.2, 25.5, and about 17.5 PSI on the fuel pressure gauge is the accurate number for a 520.
Excellent. And Chris, who had a couple questions earlier, he asked about the torque requirements for the 6 bolts. He has another question. He says, Bob, any options on retread tires or no retread tires?
I'm not a fan of the retread tires because they're very, very difficult to balance. The way they put them together, they get lumps in them, they get heavy spots in them, and they're very difficult to balance. And most people I know that tried them go back to the regular tires after a short period of time because of the balance issues, especially on the nose gear. It causes nose gear shimmy and other problems. And the price is not that much cheaper because we're flying where we're going. We're not driving where we're going like in your car.
Perfect. All right. And the next question is from Steve. He says, where can I purchase insulation to replace old insulation behind the side panels?
Aircraft Spruce sells several different kinds, and so do the other supply houses, Chief, Sky Geek, that you can use closed cell foam, you can use open cell foam. They sell bag insulation that goes behind there. There's several choices at different supply houses for whatever you want to put in there. Just make sure it meets the aircraft standards for fire retardant.
Excellent. And Michael, who you answered his question earlier, he said that he is pretty handy and he can probably make one. So anyways, we're moving on now. Good old Danny Drew. Hi, Danny. Glad you're joining us. He says, source for aircraft step. Mine just cracked again. I had the first one welded and it just cracked.
I hate to say this, Danny, but they're very, very difficult to find in good condition because either they've been come off of a geared up airplane and the bottom's ground off, or they've been in corrosion environment down in Florida along the coastal lines, stuff like that, and they're corroded from the inside and they're cracking. Salvage yards are your best bet. I've got 3 of them in my shop here that I'm just hanging on until somebody really, really needs one, because a new one right now, if you buy a new step, it's almost $5,000.
Whoa. Oof. Okay. Well, moving on to the next question from Robert. He's buying a 1965 S35, which has about 75 hours left until TBO on the IO 520. Would you think it would be worth it looking into putting an IO 550 into the airplane at this point, or rebuild the existing engine?
Okay, an IO 520 rebuild. I mean, if you get a reman engine from the factory, you can probably count on somewhere around $50,000 all in. That's firewall forward with the engine, hoses, engine mounts, accessories, and a prop overhaul. If you go to a 550 engine, you're going to have to pay a core upcharge, which is, I think, is about $2,500 now. And you're also going to have to purchase an STC to do the upgrade. And all that 550 upgrade is going to do for you is to give you better climb performance on takeoff. It will only add 2 to 3 knots of speed. It will not increase your top end very much. And it'll cost you 1 to 2, probably 2 to 3 gallons an hour more to do that. So in the long run, if you're comfortable with what you have, you like the way the airplane flies, you're probably better off in money-wise to stick with what you have.
Okay, excellent. Good advice. All right, our next question is from Amy. She says, Bob and Lauren, thank you so much for your time. This is fantastic. My 1984 Baron 58 instrument air gauge has recently increased past the high limit. Curious where we should look first to remedy this. Thank you.
Okay. If you've done instrument changes, if you've had a panel upgrade and you removed instruments, the shop that did that should have readjusted the system. You have a regulator behind each engine and you have a master regulator in the cockpit. There is a very, very specific procedure in the maintenance manual or shop manual on how to adjust the system. It has to be done one engine at a time, get it to a certain level, and then adjust the master regulator for what the reading in the cockpit should be. See if you can determine which engine is causing the high pressure by running them one at a time on the ground. And if only one of them is causing a problem, that regulator in that engine compartment may be at issue. Maybe just cleaning it may help it.
Excellent. Okay, and another question from Michael above. He says, how accurate would you expect your fuel levels to be using a newer digital fuel level meter with the old senders after calibration?
Well, the digital gauges are very, very nice. But the old resistance type fuel systems that all of our airplanes have until you go to the new digital system is not very accurate. It's reading resistance to ground, and it's all dependent on what the condition of them they are, how good a shape the wipers are in, and things like that. So, they're probably 80 to 90% accurate if they're in good condition, and it can go downhill from there. The new digital CIES systems are very, very accurate. I put them in my airplane with the digital gauges, and if it says 20 gallons, you've got 20 gallons on board, and it's very, very accurate and stays that way because there's nothing in the tank. It's using it through magnetics and things like that, and it seems to work quite well.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to take a quick jump right here and welcome everyone who is joining us. We've had a lot of people that have just recently joined the live stream. So welcome. We're so glad you're here. We've got Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley here, and I'm Lauren Bayles at the ABS office here, and we're answering your tech questions today. Well, rather, Bob is answering your tech questions. I'm just helping him along. So if you have any questions, maintenance questions, post them in the chat, and we will try to address those just as soon as we can. And I'll say, if you're not an ABS member now, this is one of the benefits you get as an ABS member is you get the opportunity to talk to our technical advisors on the phone 5 days a week. You can post your question in the tech tips section on our website. You can email us. It is well worth the $75 a year to have the opportunity to talk to technical advisors like Bob Ripley. So if you're not a member yet, I'd say hop on over to bonanza.org and join ABS today, because this is a huge benefit that you get. So Bob, we're going to just jump right back into questions if you're okay with it.
Let's go, Lauren.
Excellent. Okay, this question is from Don. He says, the fuel bladders in my F-33A are 29 years old, and the right fuel drain valve must be replaced due to the leakage. What precautions should be used to avoid damaging the aged bladder?
Well, if it's just the drain valve leaking, you can change the drain valve without draining the tank. You won't do any damage to the tank at all. It's better to do it with it full because it holds the tank valve and holds the tank bottom down into the bladder bay and allows you to push the valve back into the nipple. If you go into the tank to take it out and hold it down by yourself, then you're taking plates off, you're disturbing the tank, and it may cause other issues to happen down the road. But it's easier to change the drain valve by itself if that's the only place it's leaking. If the bladder itself is leaking, bladder replacement is the best way to go, and a new bladder, not a rebuilt bladder, is the best way to go.
Perfect. Okay, and this question is from Bob. He says, when leaning with an engine monitor, which cylinder do you lean to, i.e. first one to the peak, the last one to peak, or the average of all?
If you're running rich of peak, in other words, we want to decrease the mixture until the first cylinder that peaks reaches the limit. And from that point, we want to screw the mixture back in, richening the mixture until it drops 75 to 100 degrees as per Continental recommendations. If you're going to go lean of peak, We do it on the last cylinder to go lean, and then you can go whatever you want to go, 25, 50, 75 lean of peak. You're going to lose speed. Your cylinder head tips are going to cool down, and the engine is not developing as much horsepower, so your EGTs will cool off also. But you have to go on last cylinder if you're going to run lean to peak. If you're going to go on rich at peak, it's the first cylinder to go lean. And most modern day engine monitors allow you to select which mode you want to operate in.
Perfect. Okay, our next question is from Sid. He says, I have a 1967 V35 with 3,600 total time. It has been corrosion X'd. Whoop, lost my question. It has been corrosion X'd in the past and always has black streaking on the wings and inspection covers when flying in moisture. The aircraft has no signs of corrosion. Is there any way to clean that stuff out so any future paint work doesn't fail?
Not really. It sounds like it may have been corrosion X'd very, very, very heavy. We see that in a lot of cases where people get overzealous and think more is better, and it's really not. Corrosion X is put in as a fog or a mist. We don't want to put it in as a liquid and have it flow all over the place. It'll get in every seam in the airplane. It gets in every nook, crevice, and cranny, and it'll stay there until it gets pushed out by something, either air pressure or moisture gets in the airplane and it'll come out. It eventually will quit doing it, but it may take years to do it. And we tell people, if you're going to paint your airplane, no corrosion X for at least 2 years before a paint job.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. All right. Our next question is from Mike. He says, I have a 78 F33A with an IO 550. It has a DeShannon baffle kit and gammy injectors. The number 5 cylinder runs 30 degrees warmer than all the other cylinders. On climb out, I have to restrict climb to 500 FPM or I'll exceed 380 degrees. Any ideas?
Number 5 is the middle cylinder, the front cylinder on the right, and it's behind the alternator. We do see issues sometimes with that cylinder. It may not be the cylinder issue. The first thing I would try is take the probe out of number 5. You didn't say EGT or CHT, but I'm assuming you're talking CHT at 380, and swap it over to number 2 or number 3 or another cylinder location and see if the problem follows it. If the problem follows it, it's just a simple probe change. And the probes do degrade over a period of time. 800, 900 hours, we see probes start to lose their resistance capacity, and they will change the readings, and it's a simple probe change can fix it. Other than that, check to make sure the baffles all around the front, in front of the alternator with the Shannon baffles, are sealed to the crankcase, and make sure the airflow is moving correctly in that area. Because number 5 is not usually a hot cylinder. It's usually number 4.
Okay. And from Scott, he says, I have an IO 550B for G36. What is an acceptable differential between the CHT temps and cruise flight?
Well, that's a good question. It's all depending on the airflow across the top of the engine. If you've still got factory baffles, it's probably not going to be as good as with DeShannon baffles. Most of the DeShannon baffle systems, with everything set up correctly, you can be within 20 degrees and stay there. My airplane will stay within about 15 degrees between all 6 cylinders on CHT.
Okay, perfect. From Devang, he says we have a 1987 F33A. Besides the POH, are there any other good books to read to make sure we are running the plane in the best way possible to decrease maintenance issues and keep the plane running well?
Colvin's Clinic, which is available in the office, has been out for many, 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 many years. That's a good all-around book. It hasn't been updated in several years, but it's still got a lot of good information in it. There's several books in the office that are available online also that talk about how to help maintain your Bonanza that you can do as an owner and an operator. The best thing to do is keep it clean and fly it as much as you can fly it. That's the best thing for it. Babying it doesn't do any good.
Okay, perfect. And the very, very first question we talked about was from Brian. He had posted it on our ABS Facebook page, I believe yesterday, and he kind of modified the question a little bit. So I'll ask it to you again in case you have anything to add, but he says, the electric pump the electric fuel pump in my F-33 has failed to operate on the first few tries in cold weather, 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below. I suspect the switch, but it could be the pump. I packed the pump with ice for 30 minutes and I couldn't get it to fail. I have hooked it up to an idiot light in the circuit to verify whether or not I'm getting power to the valve or if it occurs again. Any hunches? So I think the change was there that he didn't include initially was that he packed it with ice. Mm-hmm.
That's going to be hard to figure out. And the light that he put in there will at least show if the pump doesn't come on. If the light comes on, the switch is operating normally and it's the pump.
Okay. And Brian, if you're listening to this, we actually asked Bob your question you posted yesterday at the very beginning. So if you go back to the very beginning of this live video, you'll be able to see him address your question there as well. All right, our next question comes from Joel. He says, hi, Bob. I am a new Bonanza G36 owner learning how to lean properly. Is there a target temp for CHTs? Also, when in the descent and throughout the approach, should I be at full rich?
Okay. CHT is all dependent on flight conditions and airflow across the top of the engine. During climb out, your CHT is obviously going to be higher because you have less airflow across the top of the engine, and your airspeed is slower during climb. In cruise flight, if you can maintain CHTs in the 370 to 380 range at the high end, and most engines with good baffle systems and are operating up at altitude will stay in the 350 to 360 range and run all day long. Much cooler than that, it doesn't get the engine or the cylinders hot enough to keep the buildups on the valve off. As far as your EGT is all based on how much fuel is going into the engine. On takeoff, you want to make sure you have the maximum rate of fuel flow as specified in the manual. Around 1,300 EGTs in Fahrenheit. I know yours is in centigrade, but 1,300 EGT can be converted. And if you see around 1,300 to 1,325 EGT on takeoff, your fuel flow is optimum for that condition. And as far as your mixture control in the pattern, if you're up at altitude and you're at 20 inches of manifold pressure, or 21 inches of manifold pressure, and you're running 75 rich of peak, if you maintain that same manifold pressure on the way down, you will have to, as you come down, you'll have to retard the throttle and increase the fuel flow, maintain that same ratio all the way down, and then push the fuel to full rich when you get into the pattern. So if you have to do a go around, you're ready to go around.
Perfect. All right. Our friend Tony says, on a BNC backup alternator, is BNC the only authorized overhauler, or can I send it to someone like Modified Accessories?
I think BNC is the only one that can do that. I'm not for sure on that answer, but everyone I've ever done, I've always sent them back to the factory and they can do the overhaul on them.
Perfect. And also Nick, hi Nick. Bob says, hi Bob, I have a 1960 33 Debonair and I have some play in my elevator trim tab actuators. I've already replaced the bolts from the push rod to the tab with the closed tolerance bolts you recommended. So I'm planning on pulling the actuator out this annual. What wear items in the actuator should I expect to see wear on and need to replace?
Okay, there is a bushing and a spacer where the snap ring is right at the entrance to the actuator at the aft end of it. That's where you're going to see the most wear, and also in the shaft itself. You might be ahead of the game to just look around and see if you can find somebody that's already got a set of overhauled actuators and just exchange, and you're going to come out ahead because they're in a shop, they've overhauled them, everything will be like new in it, and in the long run you'll probably come out cheaper than you buying the parts from the manufacturer, from Textron, because that a couple of those parts in there are quite expensive.
Okay, very good. And Sid has a question. I'm coming up on my first annual on my 1967 V35. The gear motor has 1,400 hours since overhaul, but the brushes have been inspected almost every year as a log entry. Should I just go ahead and have it rebuilt this winter?
Okay. First thing is, we do not recommend brushes be removed from the motor at all. The maintenance manual says replace the brushes after 500 hours. The problem is when you take the brushes out of the motor, you've removed them from their environment, and when you put them back in, they don't always seat to the commutator in exactly the same orientation they were when the motor was running. And because in your airplane, since it's 12 volt, also in a 24 volt, but more important in a 12 volt, is that connection between the brush and the commutator allows the motor to operate when it has power applied to it, but it also allows the motor to ground the field and turn the motor in, the brushes to ground the field and turn the motor into a brake, causing your dynamic brake for your landing gear system to operate correctly. And we recommend motors be overhauled after 2,000 hours unless they have a problem during the life during that 2,000 hours. If your system is operating okay and your motor is stopping at 1/8 to 1/4 turn with a 14 volt power supply attached to the airplane, every time you go up and every time you go down while it's on jacks, I wouldn't do anything to the motor because it's working okay. Because an overhaul motor in that airplane, which it probably has a Lamb motor in it, is going to be close to $2,000.
Perfect. All right. Chris asks, H35 some days needs more right rudder than others. Someone commented that rudder gear is out of whack, but when in flight, not very noticeable. Is my control gear in need of adjustment?
On a V-tail, that's something you couldn't say without, doing some rigging checks. Walk around the airplane first. It isn't always the rudder causing the problem. Make sure the flaps are even with the bottom of the fuselage. And with the control wheel in the cockpit level, centered and level, make sure both ailerons, trailing edges, match up with the trailing edges of the flaps. If they don't match up with the wingtips, that's okay. What we want to see is one continuous line from the outboard trailing edge of the aileron all the way to the bottom of the fuselage on both sides with the control wheel level. If all that's good, then you could have your tail rigging checked. But if the ball is in the center, hands and feet off in the cockpit, up at cruise flight or cruise power settings, then your tail is not out of rig. Also, too, while you got it on, if you want to put it on jacks or put jacks under it, check that the floating instrument panel in that airplane has not had a mount go bad and the instrument panel is sagging on one side or the other side, causing the ball to indicate incorrectly. That's the first thing we do when we rig an airplane in our shop is we put a level across the seat tracks and make sure the instrument panel is level when the airplane is level. So if the seat tracks show level with the airplane level, then the ball should be dead in the center between the two lines. If it's not, you've got a bad panel mount. In fact, I had somebody call me yesterday. He had a bad panel mount. It was sagging on the left side, which is the most common, and I ordered a couple of mounts for him.
Wow. Very good. All right. Well, I just want to take a quick second and let people know it's not too late to post your questions. If you have something you want to ask Bob Ripley, go ahead and add it in the comment section here, and we'll try to address those just as soon as possible. And thank you so much, Bob, for doing this already. You've done great. You've answered a ton of questions. And before we jump back in, do you kind of want to give people an update on the cable issue?
Sure. Last year in November, we came out with the AD on the aileron cable on the earlier model airplanes from the S model up to the middle of the A36s and some of the F33s. We found after the AD came out, which was a 30-day requirement to do the inspection and replace whatever you found, we've had numerous call-ins and pictures sent to me of additional broken cables that were found due to the inspection. We are still finding broken cables because people did not do the AD in the required time. And I got pictures yesterday of a cable broken with the only thing holding it together was a safety wire, and they've been flying the airplane all year just like that.
Oh my goodness.
Don't be slack in the way you look at this issue. This is a very, very, very serious issue. We've only had 2 in-flight failures, and luckily both airplanes got on the ground without anybody get hurt. We've had almost 160 cables broken and found broken during the inspection. If you have any questions about the inspection or how to do the inspection or anything you need help finding a cable, don't hesitate to call us at the office. I'll be glad to discuss it with you or your mechanic. and give you some guidelines. I've got some pictures I can send you and give you some additional guidelines. But it's a very important issue because we're still finding problems and we want to make sure everybody stays safe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Bob. I know it's a really big deal, and so we want to make sure that people take it seriously and don't, like I said, don't slack off on this.
Not at all.
And real quickly, if you guys have questions, go ahead and post those in the comment section. We'd love to have Bob answer those for you. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is ABS Senior Technical Advisor, Bob Ripley, and I'm Lauren Bayles here at the ABS office, and we're trying to answer as many of your technical questions as we can today. Bob, you also had mentioned something about a prop governor update. Would you like to give a little brief update on that as well?
Yes, just recently Macaulay came out with a AD, and it's been a service bulletin for quite a while now. It was first found over in Australia, and Macaulay had installed some or manufactured some idler gears inside of the governor that were failing, causing prop governor problems and runaway propellers and some other issues. The AD only affects certain governors on certain model airplanes. And if the governor had been overhauled in a recent period before this time and the parts listed on the overhaul tag did not indicate this part number, the AD is not applicable. And that's the calls that I'm getting a lot of. Well, my governor was overhauled and they didn't put that part in it. Do I still have to do the AD and replace the governor? No, you do not. There was a paperwork that came out, a service bulletin from Macaulay that states if the other alternate part number was put in during the overhaul period, the AD is not applicable to your governor. So don't get talked into just replacing the governor. Find out what was done if it was a recent overhaul before you replace the governor.
Perfect. All right, we got another question from Chris here. He says, Bob, are folks replacing the black duct associated with the cable issue? The black duct absorbs moisture.
Correct. That was the biggest problem with the AD, or with the problem with the airplane, is we found that duct is made of fiberglass impregnated cloth made by a company called Bemco in California. And as that duct moves heat through it to put heat in the rear baggage area of the 5-seat and 6-seat airplanes, it causes moisture to build up and it's condensing and it's dripping chlorides because of the impregnation of the fiberglass that they impregnate it with to protect it, and it's dripping onto the cable because chlorides are the only thing that can corrode stainless steel, and the ends of the cable that are breaking are made of stainless steel. We sent this to the NTSB labs and this is what they advised. So if you are not going to put people in the back section of an airplane that has 5th and 6th seats, we suggest that you just put a plug in the end of the plenum where the duct attaches at the front under the rear seats, under the front seats, and just eliminate the heat going to the baggage compartment. You will still have heat in the passenger area for the 3rd and 4th seats, just none all the way back. Eliminate the duct completely. Or if you still want to keep the heat going back there, replace it with the orange skeet hose, a double wall skeet hose, which can be purchased through any of the supply houses, and replace it with that and get the fiberglass impregnated duct out.
Interesting. Okay.
That's all in our guidelines on the website also.
Perfect. Our next question comes from Brian. He says, what kind of glue or tape, perhaps two-sided tape, is the best to put back interior panels, such as the panels that are against the side of the rear passenger compartments of a Bonanza? His panels are sagging currently.
If it's what I'm thinking he's talking about, if it's a panel, if it's a metal panel with a fabric over the top of it, a lot of times Velcro works good if you're going to remove the panel. If it's just glued onto the ceiling like an overhead panel or a headliner, there's nothing you can do but take it out and take it loose and re-glue the whole thing to get it to look right. Any kind of a good contact cement works okay to glue it with. There's a product called 1300L made by 3M Manufacturing. It's a very, very, very strong contact glue. We use it to put propeller boots on, and we use it for other high load situations such as door seals, propeller boots. things like that. But if you put a panel on with it, you're probably going to tear the panel trying to take it back off again later. So a standard contact adhesive or a double-faced tape would work also too, depending on the exact panel you're talking about.
Perfect. Okay. And our next question comes from Patrick. He says, good day. Good day. Thank you for the help. Do you recommend LPS2 for the rod end lubrication?
LPS2 is a general purpose lubrication. It can be used any place on the whole airplane. And as I teach at service clinics, and my key terminology, I said, if it turns, if it twists, if it oscillates, if it moves, or if you think it moves, spray it with LPS2 once a month. You can't hurt it. You can't put too much on it. All it's going to do is make it last longer. The only exception to this rule is the wing bolts, and we want to put an LPS3 on the wing bolts under the covers on the top of the wings, and that's a corrosion proofing material. It creates a waxy coating to protect the wing bolts. And on the flap limit switch rollers, which are up in the left flap well, on early model airplanes, you have 2 rollers. On later model airplanes, you have 4 rollers. We use LPS1 on those because it's much thinner and it doesn't attract the dirt. But LPS2, general purpose lube, in all your hinges, your locks, your handles, all flight controls, any hinges, any rod end bearings, is perfect.
Excellent. All right, and this is Brian, who had a couple questions earlier. He said, just out of curiosity, my F-33A was formerly owned and operated by Lufthansa Flight Training. It has a Hartzell propeller, but the AFM only shows a McCauley prop. Lufthansa documented every little thing with 337s, but there's no reference to a propeller type change. Is AFM just incorrect?
No, it could probably have a Hartzell prop also. I would look at the aircraft type data certificate sheet, and you can go online to the FAA website and look at the type certificate sheet for the F-33 model airplane. And you'll have to look at the bottom of it. It's general information for all models, and it will list all the propellers that are approved to go on that airplane. And it's probably an approved propeller because Hartzell and McCauley both did installations for Lufthansa airplanes.
Excellent. All right, and Bob, is there one item in particular or one area that you see on service clinics that's most overlooked or people aren't paying attention to that you recommend that they're watching as owners themselves?
Lubrication of the airplane. It's a very, very simple process to take 10 minutes, folks, and once a month, once every other month, just walk around your airplane with a squirt can and squirt everything that moves. It makes things last longer. You'll spend a lot less money down the road, and also it makes you look harder at your airplane. Instead of doing a pre-flight because you want to go fly your airplane and you do a quick pre-flight and you look at it, do a lubrication once a month, or like I said, every 2 months, and you look better at your airplane because you're not going to go flying. Also, another thing we see a lot of is in the landing gear, up in the wheel well, the landing gear uplock cable. There's a plastic sleeve on the cable that a lot of mechanics think the plastic sleeve is supposed to cover the end of the cable. And there is a service bulletin and an AD on the earlier model airplanes that specify that you should be able to see 3/8 to 1/2 inch of cable. And you should inspect the end of that cable where it goes into the metal swedge every pre-flight to make sure it's not frayed. If you find a broken cable or a frayed cable, you can fly the airplane someplace to get it fixed. Just do not retract the landing gear. Leave it down and fly it to where you have to go to get it fixed with the gear down. You'll be perfectly safe.
Perfect. And Chris says, a panel rudder question again. Was this the stock panel you were referring to, or could it be a DeShannon, or does the panel type matter?
This is about the sagging panel.
Yes, I believe so. Let me go back up and check. This was Chris Siegfried. Chris asked earlier, the H-35 some days need way more rudder than others. Someone commented this, that was his question.
The original panel, the left panel with the flight instruments in it, had a floating panel. It has 2 mounts, one in the lower right corner and one in the lower left corner, that are shock mounts to allow the panel to float. And those mounts do fail after so many years. And it's 90% of the time, it's the left one that fails and not the right one, but either one could fail. check those two mounts. If you grab the bottom edge of the panel and go on the far left and grab under the panel, if you can lift it up and down like a half an inch or so, the mount has failed. And try that on either side. It should move up and down slightly, but not a lot. If you find a failed mount, you can still buy them. They're about $60 and replace the whole mount.
Perfect. And our buddy Chris again says, are grease caps necessary on the grease fittings of the landing gear?
Not necessary, but a good idea. It keeps dirt from getting into the fittings. It just keeps them clean, and it makes it better because if the guy that's going to grease your airplane that you're in, or if you're going to grease it and there's dirt on there and you put like a grease gun in, you're going to pump that dirt back into the grease fitting inside the fitting, and you're going to have further problems down the road. You can put a grease cap on every fitting on the entire airplane except on the uplock roller. If you have the old style uplock rollers with the Zerk fitting on them, you cannot put a grease fitting cap on there because it will hit the uplock cable when the gear is in the retracted position.
You don't want that.
No.
Michael says, are there any good alternatives to LPS?
There's a stuff called Bow Shield, and I'm not sure who makes it. It's good for a corrosion preventing material, but LPS is the recommended product. We don't want to use WD-40. WD-40 does not work well aluminum, and WD-40 is not a lubricant. It's a water dispersant. That's thus the name WD. LPS seems to be the best product for what we use and what's recommended in most cases. On the corrosion proofing, the Bow Shield works okay. Corrosion X works okay for the wing bolts. As long as you produce a waxy type coating on the wing bolts, it protects the moisture and air from getting to them, and thus protects you from corrosion issues. And along that too is if you take the plates off the wing bolts to inspect the wing bolts and you happen to break one of the little clips, make sure you get a new clip. Don't make a homemade clip because the wing bolt plate's gonna come off, then it's gonna cost you about twice as much money.
Yeah. All right, our next question is it's from Roger. He's here in Wichita. Hi, Roger. I'm glad you're joining us today. He swings by the ABS office every once in a while. So hi, Roger. He says, Bob, what's with the oiled canvas wrap on our gear assembly? A simple fix from Beech?
Say again, Lauren?
What's with the oiled canvas wrap on our gear assembly? Is it a simple fix from Beech?
I'm not sure what he's talking about.
All right, Roger, if you hear this, can you maybe expound on your question here about the oiled canvas wrap? I'll try to watch for it here in the comments down below. Yeah.
He's talking about the uplock boots, the ones in the top, up in the wheel well on the top of the gear that protect the uplock. Those are ice boots is what they are, and they're protect from landing and taking off in slush from getting the uplock frozen. If that's what he's talking about. I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about.
Okay, well, Roger, if you hear this and you want to maybe clarify, we'll try to get that down below.
Give me a call tomorrow, Roger, or later in the afternoon today if you like to. I'll be here till 5 Eastern time, and I'll be glad to talk with you about it too.
Perfect. Michael says, what would you recommend filling your wing bolt covers with to prevent water pooling and prevent rust?
Well, we don't want to fill them with anything. We want to protect the wing bolt nut. And what you see when you take the cover off is the nut. The bolt comes from the inside out, and the nut is installed on the outside and torqued to a specific torque. You want to protect the nut with LPS 3, and then take a little bit of LPS 3 and wipe it around the cavity or the fitting. We call it the bathtub. And in the bottom of all the fittings or the bathtubs, there is a drain hole. Use the plastic straw off the LPS can after the LPS dries 24 hours later and creates the waxy coating to clean the drain hole out so any water that does get in there can get out. On the front fittings, on the upper front fittings, the plastic straw will only go in a small amount, and that is perfectly normal. In the back fittings, it will go all the way through. If you drop it, it'll come back out on the ground, and it's not a big deal. But don't be alarmed by it not going in more than about a half an inch on the front. That's normal condition.
Excellent. All right, and Eric says with the V35A, on the nose gear well, there is a tube that passes through the well to support the nose gear and cow flap rods. The left side seems secure, but the right side seems sloppy. Any recommendations? Thank you.
That's the crossover shaft bushing. In the wheel well, that is the crossover shaft that retracts the nose landing gear doors. Keeps tension on it with a spring, and also your cow flaps, left and right cow flaps, go through the inside of that rod. There is a bushing on the end of each of those rods where it goes into the nose keel tunnel, and those bushings can be replaced. They're a little difficult to do. It's a several-hour job, but they can be replaced.
Okay. And Chris says, with the H35, a Challenger air filter performance increase?
Yes, you will get a little bit of performance increase with the Challenger air filter because it does flow a little better. The only drawback with Challenger filters is they require a specific wash and cleaning procedure each year, and it takes special chemicals and cleaning stuff, a cleaning kit you can get from Aircraft Spruce or some of the other supply houses, and you have to adhere to that cleaning procedure. Otherwise, it doesn't do you any good. Also, as long as we're on air filters, there is an AD 842602 that talks about paper air filters. And I see many logbooks that I look at that mechanics are using the Donaldson filter, which is installed from the factory on the later model A36s and stuff, and they're calling that a paper filter. That AD does not apply if a Donaldson filter is in the airplane. That is a plastic media filter. It has its own requirements for 3 years or 500 hours, whichever comes first. If you're using the spongy bracket sticky filter, that should be replaced every annual. If you're going to use the Challenger filter, it's required to be washed and cleaned and relubricated every annual.
Excellent. And just to follow up with that question that Roger asked earlier, he said yes. So I think you answered his question. I think you did figure it out.
Those are just protection from ice and slush. I don't have that where I'm at, so a lot of airplanes in Florida don't even have the boots on. I've seen that before, and in very warm climates where they're not going to be in any kind of weather or slush, the boots are taken off.
Yes.
Performance Aero sells the boots as an aftermarket. They're cheaper than Textron or Beech parts, and they're very good quality boots. And there's a couple of other people that advertise in the magazine also sell an aftermarket boot.
All right, there you go, Roger. There is an alternative aftermarket for you. Brian says, I just had my aircraft painted. I tried to order and change as much hardware as possible, but only accurately ordered the elevator tab hardware as the aileron hinge stainless hardware. I later found out that the elevator hardware for the example is listed with the stabilizer, not the elevator. Does anyone supply a complete kit for each model?
There is some of the supply houses that do sell kits. Skybolt Fasteners sells a kit. They're down in Florida. Mil-Spec Fasteners used to sell a kit, but they have now they're not handling aircraft anymore. Spruce sells a kit, I think, but I don't know how complete the kit it is. And you brought up in there too about stainless fasteners for the ailerons. No stainless fastener is approved for the aileron attach screws. There's 8 attach screws on each aileron. They have to be a specific part number. There is a new corrosion resistant screw that's been out several years. It's an MS20392 Charlie-1-09. And that is the only approved screw that's allowed to go in there because it's a structural loading screw, and that's a high load position. So do not put stainless fasteners in the aileron attach screws.
Bob, it always amazes me when you just literally rattle off part numbers that are, 15 digits long, like it's no big deal. You're just put it in.
I don't know who your name is. Who are you, Lauren? But I can remember part numbers.
Yeah.
I've been doing it too long.
I know. The next question is from Devang. He says, what should we get ready for or do to make the best use of our time during a service clinic?
Nothing. Come to the service clinic with an open mind. I've had people I've had mechanics come to the service clinics. I had one mechanic told me I didn't know what I was talking about. I had another one walk off because he got mad because he thought I was picking on him. And I do the same thing to every single airplane that comes through the clinic. I've had airplanes that owners don't want to write things down because they don't believe them. They come in there where they think they have a perfect airplane. But the best time to come to a service clinic is just before you go to an annual. And I will help you and save you money at the service clinic in telling your shop exactly what to go look at and save them the time of having you do it or doing the research. I may be able to give you a lot of the part numbers you're going to need and things like that if I have them available with me and I know them. Um, the best time to come is before an annual, not after an annual. Then you're going to find out what your shop didn't do. We want to find out before you go to the shop so it gets accomplished and gets taken care of when it's in for maintenance. And preventive maintenance is the name of the game in maintaining our airplanes. Alternators, gear-driven alternators should have a slippage check. You know, we do them in our shop every time the airplane comes in for an annual. We pull the alternator, we do the slippage check on the drive hub. A lot of shops don't have the tools to do it with. Call us and we can help you with that. We do mag inspections every 500 hours, air pump replacement every 500 hours. This is good preventive maintenance so you don't get broke down somewhere and it costs you 3 or 4 or 5 times as much money as it would have if you'd have done it the first time.
Yeah. And Brian said real quick following up that he said, sorry, he said they looked like stainless.
Okay,
so
good.
And then our next question is from Nick. He says, where is the best place to get replacement clips for the wing bolt covers?
The only place to get them, there is some aftermarket places that have got part numbers for the Textron clips, but Textron is the only place that makes the clips. There is a couple of people that I'm aware of that have looked into manufacturing them because the prices got so high about 3 or 4 years ago. They were over $120 per clip. And now they're down in the 80 range. But Textron is the only place to actually get them from. If somebody's got some on an aftermarket, they've bought them from Textron or they bought a place out that had some. And I try to find them on, there's a program called PartsBase. I look through it every once in a while. If I find somebody that's got 10 clips they bought, I buy them all and put them in stock because if I can save $5 a piece, I save you $5 a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Chris says, for H35, an occasional oil on the windshield. I'm thinking it's from cycling the prop too fast during run-up.
I doubt it. I would check the blades on the prop. If there is oil on the backside of the blades in the prop, the prop seals might be leaking, or it also could be the front crankshaft seal leaking. If the front crankshaft seal is leaking and it can be replaced without taking the engine out, take the prop off, you can change the seal. But there is a very specific service bulletin published by Continental about replacement of the seal. So make sure your shop follows that exactly the way it's written with the sanding of the scuff lines and everything in the crankshaft to make sure the new seal will bite and seal to the crankshaft. And if you have oil on the back of the blades, the only thing you can do is pull the prop and have it resealed.
Excellent. Okay, well, this is pretty miraculous. I don't know how we do this every time, Bob, but I promise we've rolled through every question and we're rolling up right here to the top of the hour. So before I let you go, I did want to mention a couple things. One, Bob mentioned earlier about the service clinic. Devang asked the question about like, what should I do to get ready for a service clinic? And I wanted to let you guys know that our service clinic schedule has been announced. Registration is not available for all of them yet. Most of those will be available in February, but you can go ahead and go to our website, bonanza.org/events, and you can take a look at the schedule there if you're interested in getting signed up for a service clinic and kind of pencil it in on your calendar for now. Service clinics are over 4 days. They are run on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and you register for an hour-and-a-half time slot, and you take your aircraft to this location, and one of our inspectors, like Bob, he's one of them, will inspect your aircraft with you from tip to tail. It's a great thing to do, like you said before, an annual, so they can help you find issues before you go into your annual, so you can explain that information with your mechanic. So I wanted to let you guys know that those service clinic events are available for you to look at and see, but registration is not open yet, so you'll have to wait just a little bit longer for that, and then you can go and see Bob. And Bob, if you have a few more minutes, I just got a few more questions that came in we might be able to answer real quickly.
Let me talk one thing about the service clinic here too.
Sure.
If you can't come to the service clinic, if you can't get in the schedule, I highly encourage you to come and watch. Follow us around for 2 or 3 airplanes. You will learn immense amount about your airplane. Even if it's not yours, You'll learn how to take care of your own airplane. I encourage that. Ask questions. That's what we're there for. I call it an owner experience. If you don't leave a service clinic and not understand more about your airplane, we didn't do our job.
Yeah, absolutely. Service clinics are an incredible service and opportunity for anyone. And you have to be an ABS member. So if you're interested in going to a service clinic, first thing to do is join ABS if you haven't already done that. It's the easiest $75 you'll ever spend. You'll get things like this opportunity to ask your questions to a technical advisor. You'll get to attend service clinics. You can attend our Beechcraft pilot proficiency programs, which are one-day trainings. We have online learning center. I mean, there's so much that you'll get as a member of ABS. So if you haven't done that, your first step is to join ABS. So Bob, I have a few more questions I'll throw in real quickly.
Sure, we got time.
This one is from Phil. He said, did Bob say he overhauls mags at 500 hours? Thanks, Bob and Lauren. Hi, Phil.
We don't overhaul them, Phil. We recommend Continental and the old Bendix manufacturers and Slick manufacturer, which is now Champion Aerospace. They recommend a 500-hour inspection, which is not an overhaul. It doesn't cost as much as an overhaul, but we have high wear parts in the mag, such as the points, the cam follower, and their condenser. And those get replaced at 500-hour intervals. And then in most cases, the mag will go to TBO without further problems, unless there's some kind of a failure from something inside of it. But a routine 500-hour usually runs $300 to $350 a mag, and then an overhaul may be as close as high as $550 to $600. So it's a lot cheaper to do preventive maintenance, as I said before, and that's what a 500-hour inspection is for.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, Mike says, is it normal to have oil on the springs of the push rods on an IO 550?
No, sir, it's not. Either you've got a leak somewhere else in the engine compartment, but an oil leak in an aircraft, especially with all the air moving through the engine compartment, can be very, very difficult to locate. The first thing you got to do is get all that oil off, get it clean, and then go run it up on the ground and see if you can pin the point down where it's coming from. If you can't do that, go fly it around the pattern one time, bring it back and see if you can pin down where it's coming from before it blows all over the whole compartment. And sometimes it's very, very misleading. And I've gone days and days working on airplanes trying to pin down an oil leak. If you think you have it in the area, what works great is baby powder. Clean it, spray some, squirt some baby powder up in the area where you think the oil is, run the engine on the ground, and it's a definite indicator where the leak is, and the baby powder won't hurt it. It's only on the outside. You can always wash it off, but it's a good oil leak indicator. But there should be no oil on the springs.
Perfect. Okay, and it looks like we have one more in here from Michael. He says, I too have an H35, and there are questions about the front seal and its replacement, hence my need for a differential check. I thought for an IO 470G, there were no more options to fix this issue with the prop seal. Is that incorrect? It may save me from having to replace my engine. And he says the beach prop on my H35, if that matters.
That front crankshaft seal can be replaced on that engine. I think he said it's an IO 470G.
Yes.
Okay, that doesn't sound right, but I'd have to tell him to just call me tomorrow and we can talk about this on the phone. It'd be easier because I need to look up some information on it first. But you can do a breather pressure check if you think you have high differential crankcase pressure, and a breather pressure check can be done with an airspeed indicator. We do them frequently in our shop. We put a fitting in the top of the oil fill, and we hook it up to an airspeed indicator and run the engine. And Continental has specifications in their manuals to what airspeed you should go to.
I see he says O470, not IO, sorry.
O470, so it's a carbureted engine. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just call me tomorrow and we can discuss this a little bit more on the phone, and I can do a little research and have some more information for you.
He says he'll call. So yep, Michael, if you just give us a call to our 316-945-1700 and ask for Bob, we'll get you in touch with him tomorrow and he can help talk through this with you for sure.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we have come to the end of the questions, which is fantastic. For those of you who don't know Bob, again, he's our senior technical advisor. And actually, I wanted to mention this earlier and I forgot to. He was just recently awarded the FAA Wright Brothers Master Pilot and the Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award. So he has got 50 years of experience both flying and working on these aircraft, and it is you can see that. I mean, he's just rattling off the answers to all these questions. He is a wealth of knowledge. We are so thankful for you, Bob. You do an amazing job for our members. I know they're all saying like, thank you so much. So thank you, Bob, from everyone who's viewing right now and for every question you've answered today. I really appreciate your time, Bob, and I know our members do. You are awesome. So anything else you want to say before we jump off today?
Thank you very much for all your support, Lauren, and everybody's support from the membership. And folks, I just enjoy doing what I'm doing, and don't ever feel embarrassed to call about any type of question. If I have a saying when I teach the ABS Maintenance Academy, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Only somebody tells you that it's stupid, because if you don't know the answer, you wouldn't ask it.
Yeah, that's right.
And don't be afraid to call and talk to me. If it's a very technical issue or it's wiring issues or something like that, no offense, but I'd much rather talk to your mechanic where we can talk technical to technical. So we don't have like the kindergarten story where it starts as green and ends up as purple at the other end of the line, you know? It just
Right.
works. Plus, I want to say thank you very much to Lauren and the ABS office. They support us in the field with all of their support and what they do in the office, and we couldn't do this job without them. And especially Lauren, I mean, I enjoy talking with her. I've worked with her for many years now, and she's just great. That's all I can say. Great.
Thanks. Well, couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. This was great. We had so many questions, great answers, Bob. We appreciate you, and we are so thankful for you and Hazel as well, because she goes to the service clinics and helps with everything. So thank you again to you guys, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody.